Ladies and gentlemen, this is just a very needed reminder that the drug war on Black people has never ended in America. Once it started, it never ended, period. This is an article that came out September 28th, 2017 in The Hill. In the injustice of treating white opioid addicts and punishing Black drug offenders. And to this day, Blacks mainly go through criminal court whenever they get caught with drug possession, because that's really the number one reason why Blacks are in prison is drug possession. When white opioid addicts commit crimes, they get drug court where they get the option to choose treatment over jail time. The disparities are still there. Anytime you see this type of disparity, then honey, that drug war never ended. So let's get into this article. There is no doubt in the next budget, significant money will be allocated in a bipartisan way to fight the opioid plague, and rightfully so. It is imperative that Congress should also allocate equivalent money for those that need rehabilitation from drug-related imprisonment, which has never, ever been done in this country, especially for Black folks. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, around 33,000 died from overdosing on opioids in 2015. The New York Times estimated at 60,000. In July 2017, FDA Director Scott Gottlieb wrote that opioid addiction had become FDA's biggest crisis. CDC Director Thomas Frieden said that America is awash in opioids. Urgent action is critical. You know, I believe it is critical in the United States with the drug addiction, but on the other hand, we have people that have been jailed for crack, cocaine, and they're serving, in many cases, life sentences, or they're going to be in there for so long, it might as well be a life sentence. And no one is reaching out to help them. But they want to pour all of this help to the white community over this opioid plague that's going on. Is that right? I don't think so. I don't think so. I just don't think it's right to view one group as a group that needs help and then ignore everyone else that may be in need of treatment as well. The opioid plague is mostly prevalent among the lower middle class, working class, and rural poor whites. The Great Recession seemed to have had a significant impact on the psyche and drug dependency of a very vital part of our nation, creating a massive public health crisis. Well, as long as you keep jailing Black people on drug possession, then, it's amazing how they keep trying to distinguish differences here when it's just not right. Okay? You are still mass incarcerating the average Black person that goes to jail for drugs, but you are calling any opioid addict that's also out here committing crimes, by the way, and it's still a public health crisis. Okay. The US government have been working for several years on several countermeasures to present, manage, and treat the opioid abuse, but more needs to be done. In 2010, the US government began cracking down on pharmacists and doctors who overprescribed opioid painkillers. In July 2016, President Obama signed into law the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act for opioid addiction treatment. and authorized millions of dollars in new funding for opioid research and treatment. In December 2016, the 21st Century Cures Act passed with wide bipartisan support, 94 to 5 in the Senate and 392 to 26 in the House, and included $1 billion in state funds to fight the opioid plague. In June 2017, Ohio Attorney General Mike DeWine filed a lawsuit against a handful pharmaceutical companies, including Purdue Pharma, Teva, and Johnson & Johnson, accusing them of spending millions of a marketing campaign to trivialize the risk of opioids while overstating the benefits of using them for chronic pain. How does one answer the African American population that is cynical that all of these activities were motivated by the fact that the opioid crisis is a white problem? How the opioid plague is indeed disproportionately a white phenomenon. In 2015, according to the data from the Kaiser Family Foundation, 83.8% of those who died of an opioid were white. African Americans were significantly less likely to be prescribed opioid to treat pain than whites. And that's because that goes back to the slavery, time of slavery where, blacks don't really feel that much pain, but white people do, which is downright laughable. Okay. There is no damn way these folks feel pain more than anyone else. Get out of here. And this disparity persists even when the numbers are adjusted for socioeconomic variables, such as income and even in emergency rooms. And I said this before when I was on my other channel. I had went through some surgery back in 2006, and I had an employee, because at the time I was a manager of an IT department. And my employee that was white also had surgery around that same time. When we both came back to work, I kid you not, I had a little amber bottle with a week's supply of opioids. When she dug in her purse and pulled out, she had a big, long bottle, and it was filled with a whole month's supply of opioids. So I knew right then and there, white people were prescribed more opioids than black people. I knew right then and there. But I have to tell you, I'm not sorry that your white doctors did that, because they really spared us this addiction. And I am grateful for that, white people. So if I have to thank you for one thing, this is the only thing I will thank you for. There you go. While 33,000 people died from overdosing on opioids in 2015, the crack epidemic in the late 80s killed around 94,000 per year. Wow. Drug abuse, especially crack cocaine, in the 1980s and 90s was predominantly an African American problem. Not really. It was a problem that was forced upon us. This government alone forced that shit in the black community. We weren't asking for that mess. Where white people went to their doctors, and many of them go to their doctors asking for the opioid. We didn't have a chance to do that with crack cocaine. It was forced down our throats. The reason for this abuse may have very similar to the opioid abuse of the recent decades: joblessness, loss of self-esteem due to job loss, societal and economic marginalization. I remember Black people telling you, because of the crack cocaine problem, that's why crime went up in the Black community. But you didn't want to hear this. But it's awfully funny now. We can go online and look at video after video after video of whites robbing pharmacies, robbing markets, supermarkets, robbing all kinds of places, robbing houses and everything, because they're trying to get money for the drug. But see, when we explained to you that crime was going to go up, and it was going up in the Black community because of the drugs, you didn't want to hear nothing. You wanted to believe that Black people were inherently violent. So what's the excuse for your people that are out here robbing banks, robbing homes, carjacking, stealing, and getting anything they can get their hands on so they can get the drug? Are they inherently violent now? Can we say the same thing about you? Of course, then the country reacted by declaring war on drugs. Of course, it reacted that way. Oh, now, oh, it's not right to put them in jail. Oh, what good is that going to do? If you really feel that way, then you need to get all these crack addicts out of prison if that's your attitude. Okay, or otherwise, stop being a fraud. The crack cocaine epidemic resulted in militarized policing of mostly minority communities, police and paramilitary forces armed with assault weapons and tactical training from special forces. See how they go all over the top when it's Black people? Were used to pacify neighborhoods suspected of being either buyers or sellers in the crack cocaine trade. The federal government responded even more harshly, issuing discriminatory 100 to 1 decree for possession or trafficking of crack versus the penalty of trafficking powder cocaine. This stood for nearly 3 decades, ladies and gentlemen, 3 decades, until 2010, when the Fair Sentencing Act cut the sentencing disparity to 18 to 1. Someone convicted in federal court of possession of 5 grams of crack cocaine received a minimum mandatory sentence of 5 years in prison, compared to less than a year for powder cocaine. In 1980, about 41,000 people were incarcerated for drug crimes, according to the Sentencing Project. In 2014, the number was about 488,400, a 1,000% increase. As Fareed Zakaria wrote in Time, drug convictions went from 15 inmates per 100,000 adults in 1980 to 148 in 1996, almost tenfold. And that was the kickoff of mass incarceration around those times. Yeah, it's amazing. Now they're on drugs. They're not going to mass incarcerate their own. They got every excuse. Oh, it's public health. Oh, what is it going to do if you put them in jail? Oh, that wouldn't be right. They got every excuse now when it's their own people. In 1996, approximately 60% of inmates incarcerated in the United States were sentenced on drug charges. That's why I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, most Black men and women are sitting in these prisons on some trumped up drug charges. Many of them are in there because they had a tiny amount of marijuana, okay, and they're getting these astronomical sentences. See, this entire system must go. Everything must go. There's no reforming that's going to remedy all of the racism that's running rampant in the legal system. The whole thing needs to go. Around 80% of those convicted on crack cocaine were Black, 10% were Hispanic. 80%, y'all, 80% of those convicted here in the US for crack cocaine were Black. So that should tell you right there the main reason Black people are in those prisons. 10% were Hispanic and only 10% were white. In 2009 alone, 1.66 million Americans were arrested on drug charges. That's outrageous. That's outrageous. That's outrageous. You're going to put nearly 2 million people in jail on some drug charges. And see, that's why you hear all of the reports that America jails more of its citizens than any other country on the face of the earth. And it's the truth. America will jail you for stupid shit. More than were arrested on assault or larceny charges. And 4 of 5 of those arrests were simply for possession. That's ridiculous. 2 million people, nearly 2 million people, are sitting in prison in the US over drug possession. A crime that harms no one but themselves. That's what they got you in there for. And they're trying to make a big deal out of that shit. No, see, this is the way they mastermind getting mostly Black people in there to do that cheap ass labor. That's what it is. It's slavery. Throughout the crack cocaine epidemic, there was little or no discussion of the crisis being brought by economic despair, or that it was a public health issue, or that the users needed rehabilitation. They didn't offer a living soul any of those things. The social upheaval caused by the drug war against minorities and their families has had deep and significant effects. And this is why, to this day, Black people are not feeling you on your opioid plague. We ain't feeling you on it. One would even suspect that the slowdown of social and economic progress of the African American community since the early 1990s would be attributed to the violent reaction of the US government to the drug crisis, which sent away many young women and mostly men and languished in prison. That is the truth. Do you know, we were actually making strides back in the 80s and 90s, and the crack epidemic came and dismantled us getting ahead at one point in time. But that just go to show you, they talk all that pull yourself up by the bootstraps and take personal responsibility, and then as soon as we do, what did they do? Came and sabotaged the Black community with crack cocaine. We weren't asking for that shit. Nobody in the Black community was looking around for crack. That was forced on us in our community by this government. These very people could have been productive members of society and helped the economic and social well-being of their families. What a waste. As Michael Eric Dyson said in a February 2017 appearance at the University of Memphis, white brothers and sisters, they're not my brothers and sisters, have been medicalized in terms of trauma and addiction. Black and brown people have been criminalized for their trauma and addiction. Absolutely. Now, I do agree with that. It would be inhumane in the extreme and certainly hypocritical if the United States were to treat the white opioid crisis as though it was a public health issue and not have an active plan to rehabilitate all of those African Americans and minorities, lost souls who were equally addicted to cheap drugs by letting them waste away in prison. There you go. And you know what? And whenever they keep bringing up how it's not a criminal issue, it's public health. Always mention to them, if that is the case, why are all these crack addicts still sitting in jail? And you said this is a public health issue when it comes down to drug addiction. Because as long as they don't do nothing about that, ladies and gentlemen, then they are being completely insincere. They're really doing this because the majority of these addicts are white. If it weren't for that, they wouldn't give a shit about these people at all. They have racialized this entire opioid addiction that's going on in this country. If you're white, you get an opportunity to go to drug court and get treatment. If you are black, it's straight to jail. And that's still going on to this day, ladies and gentlemen. The mass majority of the mass incarceration going on in the black neighborhood is over drug possession. And don't let them come and tell you otherwise. Let them keep babbling about that you're 13% and committing 50% of the crimes. It is simply not so. If you were the most violent, then it would be reflected in the prison population. It is not, ladies and gentlemen. It's not. The bulk of the black people there are there for drug possession, not no most violent crime. So don't listen to that nonsense. The next one that open their mouth and say that to you, cut them off. Walk away. Erase it if you see it in the comment section, because they're lying to you. They are lying. That all goes back to slavery. See, when you refuse to work for free, after black people left the plantation, they were refusing to work for free. That's when you became lazy. You just got to see the pattern in the things they say. When the South collapsed, after all those slaves left the plantation, they had to figure out a way to get you back into free, cheap labor. That's when you became a criminal. That's how it all happened, ladies and gentlemen, and don't let them tell you otherwise. Please tell me what you think. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can, please go ahead and hit that notification button. Peace, family.